Good evening, Calvary GVR. So, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for spending Wednesday with us. You can see we're starting to get back in the swing of things. We had church in person on Sunday. We also are back in the office. So, it's good to finally be able to stretch our legs. For those of you who saw a couple weeks ago, we kind of had to take just a pause from meeting in person just out of an abundance of caution. So, now we're swing of things. So if you want to join us, we'll be at High Point Academy this Sunday. You can feel free to stop by. See home. Always, it's okay to and maybe a bowl of cereal and watch us online. We ask that you join us on YouTube and Facebook. Into anything too quick, just a few announcements. If there's anything you guys are looking for, whether it's a small group, whether it's information about the please check out our new website, or our website that is in the process of being updated. You'll be able to find the most up-to-date information there, and it'll be able to guide you in the right steps and who to contact, places like that. And our is coming up. It is going to be October 15th through the 18th, I believe. Double check me on that. Go to the website, and there's room to. We'd love to see you sign up. You can either do it online, or if you decide to come in person to High Academy, we will have a table set up in the back where you can sign up as well. So tonight we are finishing out, close to finishing out the plague. So this is the first 13 chapters of Exodus is generally what we read, and I've been going tag teaming it for the last couple of months over what Exodus looks like. So go ahead and grab a Bible, grab a tea, grab some ice cream, give us a chance. Come join us. Let's see what God does. But right now, let's open and let's conduct the word. Amen. So we started out with the story, up in Pharaoh's household, up with both his mom and his both to be something. Hebrew mom talked to him because he was saved by God miraculously. His Egyptian brought to us miraculously by the God of the waters. So he grows up to be a very strong man, a very great general, warrior. And he conquers all of the land of Cush for the Egyptians. And Egyptian. And using this pretext, Pharaoh goes to kill Moses, chase him out of Egypt, where Moses ends up in the land of Midian for another 40 years, married, has 2 kids, has an encounter with God of calming, the 40 years of peace. And he goes back to Egypt, and God says, listen, all of my wonders. And no matter what God says, okay, I will make I'll make concessions for that. But when Moses keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, God finally just says, listen, you're going to do what I say. You are going to be part of my plan. Now we see that in contrast with Pharaoh, in that Pharaoh doesn't want to be part of it and refuses to. So eventually God lets him have his stone solid heart. But we see God builds this up over plague after plague after plague. We've got insects, we've got frogs, we've got the water turning to blood, we've got fish, we've got life, everything in Egypt is being touched. Whether it's the celestial bodies, whether it's the air, the ground, the water, everything is being touched. God is exerting power over every element. So there's no excuse. There's no way to not know who God is. To the point that we last week, that God gave favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, which is the key to what we've been studying this whole time, is that this plague is the Israelites, which also to bring glory to his name. Everything he's worked, every heart, every uh, mind, has been to bring the world to an understanding that God is the God of place, thing. That is his goal. And we see the Egyptians starting to realize this. The point that they were given silver, given the Israelites silver and gold. And that some of the Egyptians even submitted to the Israelites during the hail and moved by it. God's plan being accomplished. The salvation of Israelites and the glorification of his name. We see that Moses does what flip side, we see Pharaoh hardening his heart. He is part of God's plan, but he's not pursuing a relationship. So, to verse 14. Read the end. So, last week we were introduced to the path going to happen. Take a lamb. They said, if you don't have a lamb, join your neighbor. We saw these things that God was going to make provision for every single, whether they were on the economic scale. God was a God for everyone. And we saw that there were prescriptions. And so God carries it through in verse 14. We're going to read 14 through 16. I believe I'm reading from the NLT today. Yeah, New Living Translation. So let's dive in. Let's see what we can discern for ourselves. Modern text when we're not slaves to the Egyptians and we're not wandering through the desert. So this is God. First day of the festival, remove every trace of yeast from your homes. Who eats bread? Observe an official day for holiest may be done on these days except in the preparation of food. So God is going out of his way to describe very specific, nuanced rules for this. And it is us. I think this should hit our hearts and our souls very, very difficultly. This should sting a little bit because I don't see us as a church in America as understanding what God would mean by this. The first one, we see that it's a day to remember. This is the Lord. A law for all time. When God doesn't put a release on something for all time. Now, am I saying we're supposed to celebrate the Passover like this? No. But this pursuit of relationship, allegory, modern day preacher. And listen, one little grain of sand, one little sin will affect the entire loaf. Sin, as defined by the Bible, is doing something contrary to the command, is doing something in opposition of commands. It's disobeying him. Now, here's something we find. Verses the ending clause of any kind should be done on these days except in the preparation of food. Well, our society has bred, and it's started to the church as well, is that there's no time for rest. Is that there's not a day off. There's not a day to recuperate. There's not a day to spend time with our family. Always doing something. We are always having some sort of prescribed work have to accomplish. And early on, we see God, this is, and I think to our lives. Not aside, set aside our work, set aside our desire, our yearning to push these tasks that we have. And I'm not saying don't work diligently. I'm saying that when we are given a chance between and a prescribed task, you either choose the prescribed task or you choose relationship. Now, that's a little harsh. Jesus had both. Jesus was able to pursue a relationship with God. But God also knows that we're not perfect in it, that we need instruction on how to calm down, on how to take a day and say, okay, I am going to spend this day with family, and we are going to enjoy this day. Now, in this particular context for the Israelites, this is referring directly to Passover. These Israelites need to be ready to move at a moment's notice. But at the same notion, God's not going to move us. God influence to speak into our culture if we're not willing to take a moment to speak into our own family. We need to make sure that we take a day our family. Our families see what we desire, what we yearn for, where we want to go, what we want to do. Hopefully my daughter see the fact that I go to church. But that is difficult for us to understand, that we want to put away all distractions and focus on relationship. God's jumping back into context, though. God's saying you need to do all this because you are going to need to move at a moment's notice. Very similar to how we jump, we should jump. So in verse 17, all the way down to verse 20, it says, celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, for it will that I brought your forces out of the land of Egypt on this very day. This festival will be a permanent law for you. Celebrate this day from generation to generation. The bread you must eat must be made without yeast from the evening of the day of the first month until the evening of the 21st day of that month. During those 7 days, there must be no trace of yeast in your home. Anyone who eats anything made with yeast during this week will be cut off from the community of Israel. These regulations apply both to the foreigners living among you and to the native-born Israelites. Notion of yeast. Again, it's really interesting. God takes such care to speak into the small areas of our life. You know, we always sometimes wonder, hey, I want to do something great for the world, but God says, are you listening to the small things I want you to change? Are you listening to the small things I want you to act? He says multiple times that you should not at all eat anything. We're told multiple times from Jesus to others, but do we do that on a constant basis? Do we look for the opportunity to love? Do we look for the opportunity to love different people? Will we welcome them into our homes? Will we have that community with them? I don't know. I know sometimes I hesitate, and later on, it was God that's convicting me. But we see that God says, I am going to be with you even in the small things, even in the little yeast. I want everything out of the house so that it does not affect your ability to keep my rules, to keep my commandments. And again, by saying that this is going to be a command that lasts all time. Into the little things in our lives. And he gives us guidance, even in the smallest, most what we consider inconsequential parts of our life. He's there. He's speaking into them, saying, hey, I want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. He's also very interesting. It says, both to the foreigners living among you and the native-born Israelites. So before the Israelites leave Egypt, God is saying there will be aliens and sojourners and foreigners among you. Do not exclude them from this. Rather, tell them the rules, tell them who I am, and make sure that they join. So even to begin with, God is saying there will be foreigners in you. And we read on later in Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy more than once where God says, be kind even to the Egyptians that are among you, because you, O Israelites, were sojourners in their land. So God is like, listen, I don't care what their did, what their mom did, what their great grandfather did. When they're in community speaking after me, they are part of the community. End of conversation. So diving back into our context. In verse 21, we see Moses standing up and relaying what God has said. All the elders of Israel together and said to them, go and the Passover animal, drain the blood into a basin and take branches and blood, brush the hyssop across the top and the side, and that no one may go through the door until morning. I'm sorry, no one may go through the door until morning. The Lord will pass through the land to strike down the Egyptians. When he sees the blood on the top and sides of the door frame, the Lord will pass over your home. He will not permit his death angel to enter your house and to strike you down. We see God is asking for an example, for an action of relationship. Listen, I need you to trust me. And if you do trust me, do this. It's very different than sometimes we catch in some more legacy denominations of Christianity in the world that say you have to do this so God gives you safety. God's saying, no. Trust me. And once you trust me, do this thing. Put the blood on the doorpost and on the lintels and stay in the house until morning. And they, in the minute, he says, I want no other significance, not that I could find, except that God specified it. Because he's in the details. He's in the small life. He's not just a God that's out there saying, do all these grand things. He says, hey, I'm going to here, let's talk about the small things in your life. And because the Israelites have grown to trust and shown his safety, that we're going to shed the Passover lamb. We're going to spread its blood. We are going to do that because that's what you've told. We trust your sovereignty, and we trust in the fact that you want to make this bridge. You made this bridge to us so that we can approach you. The first law that you and your descendants must observe forever. So God's saying, do this without ceasing. Do this forever. When you enter the land the Lord has promised to give you, you will continue to observe this ceremony. Then your children will ask, what does this ceremony mean? And you will reply, it is the sacrifice to the Lord, for he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. And though he struck the Egyptians, he spared our family. When Moses had finished speaking, all the people bowed down to the ground and worshiped. So we see it. Is it off?
It's choppy.
Guys, we're a little technical. guys. So hopefully, this, our AV engineer through. I apologize, guys. I hope you know what we were talking about. I'm just going to. All right, we're going to try and wrap audio. I'm being told that there's some sort of interference in the office, just keeping off Mark. So bear with us. I apologize. This is the path. And speaking, all the people bowed ground, worshiping God, and that is God forever. Hear from Moses. How do the Israelites respond? The Israelites respond to God. Verse 28. So the people of Israel did just as the Lord commanded through Moses and Aaron. First son of Pharaoh, for Moses during the and take the rest of the Israelites. Go and worship the Lord as you take your flock, herds, as you go. But urge the people of Israel to get out of the land as quickly as possible, for they thought we will all. So the Israelites did this, and much was protected from the lights, from the cattle, from all the issues. So too, Israelites' firstborn relationship and faith to the point that the Egyptians and Pharaoh himself relented from land. God's task had been accomplished. Unfortunately, the first had person of the slave and the first all died. Which means Pharaoh was not the firstborn. He came to power, but he but we see the Egyptians out and they say, "Get out, take everything, go. If you stay here, we will die." Now they were brought to this power, but they had also come to a point where they had seen their when they followed the Israelites. So God is protecting you, is hurting us. We need you to get out. Go. We don't anymore. 34. Took their bread, their kneading boards, and their clothes, and carried them on their shoulders. As Moses instructed. And articles of silver and gold, the Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites. Whatever the Egyptians of their wealth. It's hard for us to understand how wealthy Egypt was at this time frame, because we're so far removed from an empire with. But when you look at Egypt historically, there are some intermediate periods that were caused by chaos. I think one of these happened because Egypt had lost as Israelites with favor and says, "You need the silver, go on your way." Night, the people of Israel left Ramses, the city, and started for Succoth. There were about 600,000 men, plus all the women and children. A rabble of non-Israelites went with them, along with horses and livestock. So we saw over, and we see here our leading people in Egypt because they realize that it is better they see a slave than to stay in Egypt because the God that they had ever found. For bread, they baked flat cakes from the dough without yeast. It was made without yeast. Such a hurry. So once again, they were ready at exactly what God called them. Live a life. And then we see the end. In verse 40, it says, the people of Israel had lived in Egypt for 430 years. In fact, it was on the last day of the 430th year that all the Lord's forces left the land. On this night, the Lord kept his promise to bring the people out of the land of Egypt. So this night belongs to him. By all the Israelites from. So this story culminates finally in the exodus of the Israelites. They've been given blessings by God, bless them and send them on their way. Really draw an allegory. Let out our things. He wants to be an intimate part. He wants to be involved in slavery of sin. And the last thing is, he wants us to live a life his will. Not to question, but to do it right. What's the Lord our God? And I hope that is something we can think about in the days and weeks and months to come, especially with the influx of people coming to America. I hope we can show love on a daily basis and look to the small aspects of our lives and jump at the chance to help. Not well, that's going to stop tonight, guys. Verse 40. If there's anything you want to or frustrations, if you agreed with something, if you didn't agree with something, let us know. It says 796 037. Before we close, and let's much for the time you've given us. Thank you for the ability to come and read your word. God, I ask these three things true in our lives, that we remember days, that we recognize that you're part of our lives, from the event to the smallest, and that we always stand ready to do your will. Persistence and tenacity. God, I ask that you bless our lips and our feet. Live out glory for you to this world. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, have a